They say a puppeteer died in 1987, but his doll lives on. It mimics your movements and then it replaces you. The Sea Point Promenade was a place of life and energy, where joggers, cyclists, and families strolled along the ocean front, soaking in the salty breeze and the sound of crashing waves. But amidst the bustling crowd, there was one figure who stood out: a homeless man sitting on a weathered bench, clutching a tattered puppet. The puppet was an unsettling sight. Its face was cracked and faded, its eyes wide and glassy, and its mouth frozen in a grotesque grin. The homeless man, his face hidden beneath a frayed hood, manipulated the puppet with practiced ease, making it wave at passers-by. Most ignored him, but a few tossed coins into his cup, unnerved by the puppet's lifelike movements. One jogger, a woman named Claire, slowed her pace as she passed the bench. The puppet's head suddenly twisted 180 degrees, its glassy eyes locking onto hers. Claire then froze, her breath catching in her throat. The homeless man didn't move, but the puppet raised its hand and waved at her, its grin widening. Claire then shook off the unease and quickened her pace, telling herself it was just a creepy doll. But as she jogged away, she couldn't shake the feeling that the puppet's eyes were still watching her. The locals knew the story of the Promenade puppeteer. In 1987, a street performer named Elias had entertained crowds with his puppet shows. But Elias was a troubled man, obsessed with bringing his puppet to life. One night, he was found dead on the promenade, his strings tangled around his neck. The puppet, however, was never found. Over the years, sightings of the puppet began to surface. It would appear on benches, in alleyways, or even in people's homes. Always accompanied by a homeless man no one could quite describe. Those who interacted with the puppet soon found themselves mimicking its movements, their limbs growing stiff and unresponsive. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. They had become puppets themselves, their strings pulled by an unseen force. Claire tried to forget about the encounter, but strange things began to happen. As she jogged the next morning, she noticed her movements felt off. Her arms swung in perfect mechanical arcs, and her legs moved with unnatural precision. She tried to stop, but her body kept going, as if controlled by an invisible hand. Panicked, she turned around and headed home, her limbs moving stiffly, like a marionette. When she finally reached her apartment, she collapsed on the floor, her body trembling. She looked down at her hands and screamed. Thin, almost invisible strings were wrapped around her fingers, wrists, and ankles. Claire's screams echoed through the empty apartment, but no one came to help. She tried to pull the strings off, but they were impossibly strong, cutting into her skin. Her body jerked upright, her movements no longer her own. She stumbled to the window, her limbs moving in perfect sync with the puppets. There, on the street below, stood the homeless man. The puppet was in his hands, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It waved at her, its grin stretching wider than ever. Claire's hands raised in response, mirroring the puppet's movement. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the truth. She was no longer in control. The puppet had replaced her. Days turned into weeks, and Claire's friends grew worried. She hadn't answered her phone or shown up to work. When they finally checked her apartment, they found it empty, the windows wide open. The only clue was a single puppet sitting on the couch, its glassy eyes staring at them. Meanwhile, on the promenade, a new figure appeared. A woman with stiff, mechanical movements, her face hidden beneath a hood. In her hands was a puppet, its grin eerily familiar. The homeless man was gone, but the puppet's legacy lived on. As joggers passed by, the puppet's head twisted 180 degrees, its glassy eyes locking onto its next victim.